Good day, everyone. I am Abonjo J. Binyars II. So, this is the continuation of our report, Creating a Fair Learning Environment. So, my topic starts with a question: what significant tenets in Indigenous peoples' education should be integrated in designing instructional materials? Alleviation from poverty is a motivation for most Indigenous people to seek education. Due to the distance of indigenous peoples' communities from the urban and rural communities, illiteracy rates among these special groups is high. Education among people in indigenous communities is seen as an advantage and disadvantage. As, as an advantage, education is believed to advance literacy among people in these communities. As a disadvantage, education is perceived as a means of alienation. So, how would education make indigenous peoples value their culture while addressing ways to improve the quality of their lives? One of the things teachers should be prepared for is the is the support needed by indigenous peoples when it comes to school adjustment. Specifically, they need to be guided in understanding the school policies and the culture between and among learners. Likewise, as teachers, we need to provide information to our learners to be sensitive of the cultural background of their classmates who are members of indigenous groups and to be sensitive and mindful as to how they relate with these learners. As teachers, we need to make our learners aware of the culture of indigenous peoples in the region in particular and in the Philippines in general. Tauli and Corpus listed the following teaching principles. So there are 7 teaching principles in addressing the needs of indigenous peoples. First is worldviews are integral in designing teaching approaches for indigenous education. Arrangement must be made if bilingual education is to be integrated in the primary grades. Indigenous worldview are based on deep connection with their norms and culture. That is why teaching approaches should be relevant to the culture of indigenous people. So as a teacher, we should consider knowing that the history of their culture and share this learning in their classes. Reaching out local indigenous organization for information, resources, and opportunities to work together, and inviting members of indigenous community into the classroom to share teachings and stories about their culture. Arrangements must be made if bilingual education is to be integrated in the primary grades. This is to increase language proficiency and higher cognitive function. Then second principle is contents of materials to be distributed among learners must be thoroughly checked for discriminatory contents and erroneous historical accounts. The content of materials for indigenous people must be thoroughly checked because if there is a discriminatory content and erroneous historical account, this could cause a bad effect in their history, culture, and individual lives. The third principle is local context must be considered in curriculum design. This means that the design curriculum for the indigenous people is relevant to their day-to-day activities for them to maintain the value of their culture and norms while improving the quality of their lives. The fourth one is curriculum design for basic education should integrate respect for indigenous peoples and discussion of their culture and ways of life. This is because culture is a very sensitive or delicate topic. So we should integrate respect for indigenous peoples discussion of their culture and ways of life. The fifth one is education for indigenous peoples should be designed with learning paths that highlight the value of celebrating their identity and working for the cultural enrichment of their communities. The knowledge that should be imparted to indigenous people will help them to be proud of their culture and value their identity. The sixth one is school may set up mobile schools to reach remote indigenous communities. This is because of distance of indigenous peoples communities to urban and rural communities. By the use of school mobile, we can lessen the illiteracy rate among these special groups. And the seventh and the last one is the learning resources should be made available for indigenous peoples in their communities. This is to be able to engage effectively to the learners.